If you're watching this video, chances are you've experienced bloating at some point in your life. Whether it's been a mild discomfort or a full-blown bellyache, bloating can be a significant cause of concern for those individuals who are affected. In the US, nearly 1 in 7 adults suffer from some kind of bloating. But did you know that there are several different causes of bloating and that there are a lot of different things that you can do to alleviate some of those symptoms? I'm Dr. Nelson, licensed practicing naturopathic physician and clinical nutrition professor. In this video, we're going to discuss some of the top causes of bloating and what you can do at home to improve some of those symptoms. To add a little bit more to this conversation, I'm also going to discuss a few complex causes of bloating that might need a little bit more support. So stick around to the end. So this is the perfect time for a disclaimer. While I am a practicing doctor, I'm not necessarily your doctor. These videos are for educational purposes only. So let's talk about the first thing that happens. One of the most common causes of gas and bloating is swallowing air. Swallowing air can occur during the normal eating process. Eating and drinking, we do tend to trap some gases as we swallow. And what can make them worse is when we are eating really fast. So if we eat really fast and we eat large meals, those can increase the likelihood that we're going to swallow a lot more air, causing them to be trapped in our GI tracts. There are a small subset of the population that may suffer more from trapped gases. So this doesn't necessarily apply to everyone, but if you're one of those individuals who've noticed that you've had gas, typically after eating and after drinking, even water, it may be possible that you're trapping those gases while you're drinking, and you may just need to be more mindful and more precise about how you're eating and how you're drinking. One of the best techniques is with eating foods is to eat smaller meals and to be mindful about how you're chewing and how thoroughly you're chewing those foods. So instead of just shoveling the food down, chew nice and slow, take small bites, and then swallow. Same thing for when you're drinking. Discontinuing the use of straws can be extremely helpful at decreasing the amount of gases that you're actually swallowing with drinks. It's best to use an open cup, but don't do big gulps. Don't just throw it down the hatch because that could stimulate the same cause as using the straw, again, trapping a lot of gases and air. You want to make sure you're doing nice small sips while you are drinking your liquids, particularly your water. The best part about this type of technique of slowing down, eating and drinking, it brings into another concept of mindful eating, being mindful about everything that you do. It's a concept that you'll hear me talk about quite a bit, but even being mindful while you're eating, being slow and precise, chewing your food slowly, this will only provide benefit. It will improve your digestion and allow foods to pass through the digestive tract in their adequate times instead of bringing in tons of gases with it, which will slow down the transit time by stretching the GI tract with additional air and pressure. This trapped air situation also seems to work differently for different people. I mentioned earlier that some individuals are affected while others are not. Individuals who have the functional gastrointestinal disorder known as IBS, they feel more discomfort from gas than other individuals do. So if you have a diagnosis of IBS, you're more likely experiencing gas pain even more severe than other individuals who don't have IBS. So it's important to keep an eye on that symptom as well and be able to deal with those by making some of these small changes that I mentioned on this first one. One of the other most common causes of bloating is constipation. If you're having any problems or a difficult time going to the bathroom, it can cause a buildup of stool to occur in the intestines, which can lead to some bloating. This buildup will cause dysregulation, it will cause discomfort, it will cause heaviness, and it will definitely lead to a buildup of gases. So it's definitely something that you want to try and address as soon as possible. To try and make this better, improving your fiber intake is one of the fastest ways to be able to improve that bowel movement and make sure that you're emptying out your intestines adequately. On average in the United States, most adults are eating somewhere between 5 and 15 grams of fiber a day. Usually it's a little bit less. What's actually recommended is somewhere between 25 and 30 grams of fiber per day. So most of us fall very short in the amount of fiber that we need, and improving that fiber count will really help. It's also important to note that if you're talking about fiber, you often want to make sure that you're staying hydrated. So with or without that added fiber, making sure that you're drinking enough water per day for your body weight is extremely important. You want to make sure typically you're doing about half of your body weight in fluid ounces of water should be the ideal goal. Most individuals should be able to get that if they space it out throughout the day to make sure that, again, that fiber that you're taking in is staying nice and hydrated, and it's allowing for your bowels to move properly. If you're not drinking enough water with your fiber intake, you can lead to a point where you may end up developing more constipation, because the fiber actually will hold on to water, and whatever water it does hold on to, it might actually turn it into almost like concrete in your GI tract. It's not physically concrete, but it will get very hard and it will make it very difficult to pass. So making sure that you're staying hydrated is extremely important. One of the things that I've seen pretty commonly in my clinical practice is the use of some of those tea products that promise they're going to make your tummy flat. Those teas may work really well, and they often do what they promise that they're going to do, which is, again, allow you to have a good bowel movement and make your tummy feel flat afterwards. I would express some caution while using some of those products, though. If you take a look at the back of the box or check out those ingredients, sometimes one of the first ingredients or even the last ingredient, doesn't matter too much with teas, is either rhubarb or senna or one of the other many stimulant laxatives. Avoiding the use of stimulant laxative over the long term, typically anywhere between 1 and 2 weeks, should suffice. But if you're doing anything longer than 1 and 2 weeks, it may actually cause a stimulant laxative dependency. Senna is one of the herbs that it's very easy to become dependent on. And if you're using senna or rhubarb for a prolonged period of time, it may come to a point where your body can't actually have a bowel movement without the use of these products. This will only serve to worsen constipation in the long run and cause some issues with your GI tract that we don't necessarily want for you. So be really mindful of those. It's probably best to avoid them. Again, if you need to use them for a short stint, that may be okay, but for long-term use, I would definitely try to avoid that. One of the things that you can use instead of one of those stimulant laxative herbs is a really, really powerful micromineral that your body needs, and that goes by magnesium. Magnesium is a really, really powerful micromineral. It really helps to regulate your body. It's very important for overall health, and one of the microminerals that I often recommend to a lot of my patients. Now, for gastrointestinal concerns and maybe a little bit of constipation, how magnesium is going to work is by drawing water and fluids into the digestive tract, allowing for a looser, easier passing stool. Magnesium works very well, but sometimes you need to get to the right dose, and everybody's dose is going to be different. Usually the way that you achieve that is something by taking something called to bowel tolerance. So sometimes, depending on the dose of your magnesium, you may be starting with 100 milligrams, maybe it's 250 milligrams. Usually you want to start slow and you want to work your way up. And typically I recommend taking magnesium at night so that when you wake up in the morning, you'll be able to get a good bowel movement instead of taking it during the day and may having to, run to the bathroom while you're at work or at school. So taking that magnesium at night right before bed should allow you to wake up in the morning with a better bowel movement where you can empty out some of that stool that's building up in there. And that way you'll be able to see some improvements and be able to adequately track how much magnesium you actually need to take. Usually starting out with a lower dose and again, building up, kind of doubling that dose will allow you to see usually some improvements. I wouldn't go beyond 1,000 milligrams without medical supervision, but kind of taking yourself up there gradually should be okay. And again, magnesium is generally very safe. So if you're enjoying the video so far, my prescription for you is to press that like button. Don't forget to pop that subscribe and bell icon if you want to keep getting your weekly dose of natural advice. Food intolerances are often another major cause of bloating in individuals. Certain foods like lactose and gluten can cause bloating in individuals who are intolerant to them. If you suspect that you're susceptible or intolerant to a specific food in your diet, try eliminating it from your diet and see if the symptoms improve. If you don't know if you have any intolerances, one of the best ways to see if you have intolerances is actually to keep a diet diary. What a diet diary is, it's basically a list of all of the foods that you eat during that day, being as specific as possible, including spices and different ingredients that you use to produce that food, and all of the drinks that you're ingesting as well. Taking note of those things and some of the symptoms that are associated, so maybe keeping track of how severe the bloating is on a scale from 1 to 10. Maybe you can rank it with a number. And then taking a look at that list at the end of the week and seeing if you can identify any trends in the foods that you ate. Again, spices, different foods, proteins, carbohydrates, and liquids can all trigger symptoms of bloating. And so it's definitely important to see if you can track those progress, see how you're feeling with this type of diet diary. Oftentimes, if you're untrained, it can be a little bit complicated to take a look at something like a diet diary and make sense of it. This is where, again, if you're confused and you're lost, maybe you want to reach out to a licensed naturopathic doctor or a nutrition specialist who can actually review that for you, go through it with you, and see if they can identify any trends for you. So that way you can pluck some things out of the diet and see if that improves some of the symptoms that you've been having. Another big cause is drinking carbonated drinks. So carbonated beverages really can cause bloating due to the carbon dioxide content that's present in the drinks. What you may want to try and do is switching to a non-carbonated drink using herbal teas and waters to see if that will make it any better. So if you are having some symptoms of bloating and you do like to drink carbonated drinks, eliminating sodas from the diet is always going to be health beneficial. But what I do find a lot of individuals do to eliminate sodas is that they'll use a lot of sparkling waters or a lot of the seltzer waters because they're kind of a nice substitution. You feel good, almost kind of has a good taste to it, and it changes it up from water. That added carbonation, that added carbon dioxide may actually be leading to some of the bloating and may actually be leading to some additional discomfort. Again, especially if you are one of those individuals who are susceptible to those additional gases, like people who have functional disorders like IBS. Next, I'd actually like to talk about a couple of complex causes that I see popping up more and more often in my clinical practice every day. The first one that I want to discuss is abdominal phrenic dyssynergia. Going forward, I'm going to just call it APD. APD is a condition that affects the muscles and the nerves that control the diaphragm as well as the abdominal muscles. This can cause some difficulty with breathing, some issues with digestion, and it may even lead to some symptoms of bloating, abdominal pain, as well as some difficulty belching or even being able to pass gas. This condition may be caused by some other type of underlying medical condition. Usually it looks more like a GERD or some type of a sliding hiatal hernia, typically where the stomach is passing through the diaphragm and getting trapped, again, leading to a little bit more GERD. Certain lifestyles as well as certain habits may also lead to the development of this condition. Treatment of APD often includes different medications, some lifestyle changes, as well as physical therapy. Surgery may be required in some specific cases, but it's not often required. Again, APD is one of what we would consider a functional disorder. Oftentimes, it's not one of the things that we look to first. We look for other causes, and then usually if we're not finding any improvement with anything else, then probably may require some additional support with this condition. There are some things that you can do at home to ease the symptoms. Biofeedback is really effective at helping to deal with APD, again, due to the fact that it has a functional origin. There are many tools available to help you out with biofeedback at home. There are many different devices available online. I don't particularly recommend any of them at this time. There are different biofeedback that you can do in medical offices. Different therapists have them, as well as some physical therapists as well. That is also one of the tools that's required for treating APD is physical therapy that can help to balance out some of the imbalances with the pelvic floor, as well as the diaphragm and the abdominal wall. So if you're experiencing any symptoms of APD or you've tried everything else for bloating that I've mentioned above and you haven't seen any improvements, it's definitely worth considering looking at APD as a possible diagnosis and seeing if you can get a good diagnosis and a treatment as well. The next condition is one that I have been seeing explode in my practice. The diagnosis of SIBO has been on the rise. Many individuals are being found to have this condition, and typically what the condition of SIBO is it's an abnormal overgrowth of microbes that typically do belong in the gastrointestinal tract, but usually it's because of an imbalance between the good and the bad microbes. Usually this imbalance can lead to bloating, abdominal pain, as well as some diarrhea. There are some factors that can increase the likelihood of you developing this condition, typically a weakened immune state, certain medications, most commonly being antibiotic use, and some underlying medical conditions like inflammatory bowel diseases, ulcerative colitis and Crohn's, or celiac disease may lead to the development of SIBO. One of the things that I've seen the most common with my patients who have SIBO is usually some history of prolonged antibiotic use, whether it has been for a UTI or an upper respiratory tract infection. Recurrent antibiotic use can lead to the development of SIBO in the long run, and it should be addressed ASAP because SIBO will only continue to get worse unless you address it. There are a lot of different things that you can do to treat SIBO. It's not something that you can't do anything for. Treatment of SIBO typically does involve the use of antibiotics. This will kill off the excess bacteria, and it will lead to some improvements in the symptoms. But usually the use of antibiotics in combination with dietary changes, usually low FODMAPs or other type of low fructooligosaccharide producing diet, those are the types of fibers and sugars, in addition to prebiotics, that the microbes in your GI tract will feed on. By eliminating those prebiotic fibers, it will decrease the growth of the microbes, and in use of whether it's a pharmaceutical antibiotic or a herbal antibiotic will help to decrease and suppress the growth of the microbes, with the ultimate goal of not bringing the GI tract to a state of no microbes. So we don't want to sterile a GI tract. Microbes do belong there. We just want to suppress the growth of the imbalance. So we want to bring the GI tract back into balance, and using some of those antimicrobials and dietary changes will help to do that. We do, again, want to treat SIBO. We don't want to leave it unchecked. This will lead to malnutrition as well as some other health complications if we just leave it alone. If you're experiencing any symptoms of bloating, and you might think that it's related to SIBO, especially if you've had an issue in the past where you've been taking a high dose or even low dose antibiotics for a prolonged period of time, definitely get yourself evaluated for SIBO. Usually that looks like pretty much the gold standard for SIBO testing at this point is looking for the production of hydrogen or methane gases on a breath test after exposure to a specific reagent. The tests that I like to use typically use a lactulose solution, and that way it'll give you an idea if the microbes in the GI tract are producing any hydrogen or methane. There are two different types of microbes, or different microbes produce different gases, and so being able to identify how elevated one gas over another is very helpful. There is also the difference, it's not a major difference, but there are different types of overgrowths. The one that I mentioned here initially was SIBO, that stands for small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. There are other types of overgrowths. There are small intestinal fungal overgrowths, which can also come from an imbalance in taking too much antibiotics. This imbalance, again, will lead to an overgrowth of fungus or bacteria, and it can lead to the production of increased gases in response to meals. So usually the gas production here with SIBO, it's usually tied directly to the foods that you're eating. Usually you eat something, whether it could be immediately or it could be within a few hours, you'll notice that your abdomen will start puffing up and expanding a little bit. This is usually kind of the dreaded stomach bloat that most people will talk about. You'll feel very much pregnant almost as the day progresses on, because the more foods you eat, they're rich in fibers, prebiotic fibers that the microbes will feed on, producing gases throughout the day that will have a difficult time of being passed. So this is definitely one of the ones that will cause a lot of problems for people, and definitely worth investigating to make sure that you don't in fact have SIBO and need it to be treated. As a naturopathic doctor, typically my approach to SIBO focuses on, I usually break SIBO down into 3 phases. One of the first phases is what I would call the kill phase. Usually during that, we're changing the diet a little bit, again, focusing on more of a low FODMAPs type of diet. This is again going to decrease the amount of fibers that the microbes have access to. And then we're going to increase exposure to herbal antimicrobials that are going to really, again, suppress the growth and eventually kill some of those microbes that are out of balance. Typically in the second phase, you're going to want to actually repair that gut lining, because an overgrowth of microbes does tend to cause some imbalance and damage to the GI tract, and that damage can result in some issues with the migrating motor complexes, which actually reside within the GI tract. That allows the peristaltic waves to actually go through the GI tract properly. Sometimes an overgrowth or even use of antibiotics can result in damage in that migrating motor complex, making it more difficult for the GI tract to function properly. There's also the importance of noting that the GI tract does also require a nice healthy layer of mucus within it. That's actually where the microbes reside. And so as a part of healing the GI tract, we want to make sure that you heal that mucus layer so that the microbes actually have a functional home, and that you can create a nice healthy environment for the good microbes to grow once they come back in. And then when you're looking at the third phase of the SIBO type treatments, is you want to ultimately be able to replace back the microbes that you destroyed. So as a part of the treatment process, whether it's using a herbal antimicrobial or a pharmaceutical antimicrobial agent, you do kill some of the good microbes along with the bad. That needs to be replaced, and typically third phase is a good place to do that, again, to just bring balance back to the GI tract, continue to heal the gut, and replace those microbes that you had inadvertently removed through treatment. So that's all. Thanks for taking the time to watch this video. I really hope you were able to learn something new about your bloating. Share this video with someone you know who might be experiencing some bloating and suffering as well. I look forward to seeing you all at the next video.